Before we get started, I'm going to read the mission vision for, sorry, my dot keeps disappearing. For our time together. And I'm going to put it in the chat. That's what I'm trying to do in my shuffling around here. So sorry again. It'll all come together, this technical world that we're in right now. So the mission of the community quarterly meeting is to love and serve the needs of neighbors experiencing homelessness. And I'd like to remind people every time that the mission vision for this meeting was actually created by the members of this meeting. So it really is a community driven meeting that all of you were a part of. And even if you may not have been there directly, you're still a part of it because you're in this space. And the vision is for communities of faith and social goodwill are educated and actively apply their essential abilities to help address and prevent homelessness in Pierce County through engagement with social service agencies and other innovative programs. The purpose, Associated Ministries convenes these meetings in partnership with other homeless and housing service providers working in Pierce County with the goal of creating an energizing space to gather regularly to learn about, discuss, and take action on the crisis of homelessness in our community. What we will do to achieve our purpose, we bring like-minded people together, which are all the individuals on the screen today. We inform and educate attendees about homelessness in our community, which we're going to have a great presentation on here shortly. We're going to seek understanding of effective interventions, which we will hear some great interventions here this evening, and discuss potential projects and solutions to positively impact homelessness. So we're going to meet all of those objectives tonight. So you ready? Okay. So Mike, can I call on you just unexpectedly and unplanned to give a quick blessing to start our meeting off?
Yeah, right off the cuff.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't want to pick on anybody but you.
yeah. So Valerie can do that, but of course I can get back at her because I get to do a performance appraisal later. So that's okay. I'm just saying. Anyway, okay. Let's.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm privileged to just open this session with a blessing over our time together, and I do say, Lord, please meet us in this space and just guide the conversations, the information that we're going to hear. Help us all to understand the ways that we are being called individually and together as a community to address those in need amongst us that are waiting for us. We are the answer to the prayers of many people in our community. Some answers to prayer may be amongst us sitting in this space tonight. And it's an awesome thing to think of it that way. So we just pray that we will be inspired, we will be energized, we will be informed in a new way to take action in a way that will change a life. And we are grateful for the opportunity to be in this space together with such an incredible mission as that. We now commit this time, Lord, to you. Amen.
Amen. Oh, amen. See, Mike, I'm going to call on you unexpectedly more often. That's great. Thank you for that blessing. So, what I'm going to do, just to do a couple of logistics here. Oh, I forgot to introduce my co-host, Sandy. Sandy. There she is. Sorry, Sandy.
That's okay. Bye, everybody.
So there's going to be what I'm going to ask everybody to do. There's going to be some awesome information presented and some questions are going to come to mind or some comments. You can feel free to post those in chat. And Sandy, she'll kind of help us out to try to get to any questions that are being asked. I'm going to put all the presenters' contact information in chat. So if we don't get to the questions, because we have a very limited amount of time, I encourage you to reach out to the presenters as well to continue the conversation. This is just to get conversations going. We only have an hour together. So with all that said, our first presenter is Hank Knoll. He's the database manager with Catholic Community Services. And I am so grateful that he has agreed to come here tonight to be, oh, hey, Pastor Jackson, I just saw you. That he is here tonight to give us a really good picture of what homelessness looks like in our community. So again, put those questions in the chat box because we want to make sure that you are well informed when you leave here tonight. So Hank?
Yes, thank you. I assume I can share my screen here. Let's see, are you guys seeing
Yeah, it looks great.
a data-informed look at homelessness in Pierce County?
Yes.
Okay, great. So good evening. It is really great to be with you all. I want to start by thanking Valerie and Associate Ministries for setting this up. Thanks for inviting me to participate, and thanks everyone who has joined for being here, for your concern on this issue. My name is Hank. I am a data manager over at Catholic Community Services. Like Associated Ministries, we do a lot of work on homelessness in the area. We operate some overnight shelters, provide meals, showers, other day services. We do a lot of work with homeless veterans, and also, like Associated Ministries, we're one of the main entry points for the coordinated entry system in Pierce County. If you don't know what I mean by coordinated entry, no worries. I'll get into that a little bit later. But one of my roles that I inherited from my predecessor, Garrett Nyland, who some of you may know from his work in this area as well, is to regularly pull data from our shared coordinated entry database and do some kind of basic reporting, share it with agency leaders in the community to hopefully make some data-informed improvements to the system where possible. So it's along those lines that Valerie asked me to present here. Okay, so first, if you are already familiar with what the coordinated entry system is, you have a bit of a leg up in understanding some of the stuff I'll be talking about. If not, here's my very cursory overview. So coordinated entry refers to a system where kind of all of the service agencies in an area, in our case, Pierce County, work together to serve folks more efficiently. So in this flow chart, you can see kind of with the red ovals at the bottom, unhoused folks can enter our system in a variety of ways through any agency, shelters, outreach, that kind of thing. And if they have a coordinated entry conversation, then their information is then entered into a shared database. It's assessed, it's prioritized. That's the kind of orange rectangle in the middle. And then usually one of two things can happen. One, they may be what we call divertible, meaning they may be able to be diverted relatively easily from homelessness with just some minor financial assistance like rental application fee, maybe some arrears payments, help with transportation. So that's the easiest option. It works pretty well to the extent that folks are divertible. Our system typically has the resources to help divert them. So that's the kind of greenhouse looking thing at the top left. That's diversion. So the other possibility is that they're not divertible and they actually need to have housing provided for them, either a rental that we help them pay for temporarily, that's rapid rehousing, or permanent supportive housing. That's like a unit that's owned, staffed, operated by an agency. Both of those last two options that you see on the right, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, are much more expensive options, a little more difficult to make happen. They're not as readily available. So when someone is not divertible, they first go on a wait list for housing. That's the yellow box there, wait list for housing. We'll get more into the actual data on this, but I think this is one of the major challenges with our system is basically that yellow waitlist box has become an incredible bottleneck. We add a lot more people to that list than we can reasonably house. So we'll get more into that later. First, let's look at homeless episodes. So the first few slides we'll be looking at some kind of summary data from the last year, from 2021. And so the first thing to notice is just the enormous amount of homeless episodes that happened last year. On the top right, you can see there were over 10,000 new episodes of homelessness at the individual level. That translates into around 7,000 episodes at the household level. What I mean by episodes is just anytime our system registers someone as being homeless through a meeting, through a shelter stay, by exiting a housing program into homelessness, just a tragically huge amount of people finding themselves homeless here. Moving over to the map graphic, notice that homelessness is happening kind of all over the area. I mean, more episodes in Tacoma, but Tacoma has more people. An interesting thing here, though, is that, this is looking at the town where the client became homeless, not necessarily where they're staying now. So I didn't include that for brevity's sake, but if we looked at this map where, based on where they're staying right now, you would basically see the Tacoma bubble grow a lot, and all of the other bubbles shrink. That's because the majority of services are in Tacoma, as you might know. And that's also why homelessness is a lot more visible in downtown Tacoma compared to other locations. So given this sheer amount of homelessness here, one question we might ask ourselves is, like, are these people, do they have a roof over their head? Are they being sheltered? So are our shelters keeping up with the need? This double line graph on the left, we're kind of all over the slide here, starts to answer this question. So the red line at the top tracks the number of new homeless episodes by month last year. It's essentially that 10,000 number just spread across all 12 months of 2021, basically around 800 new episodes a month, roughly. The bottom blue line is tracking the number of new shelter guests at any Pierce County shelter by a corresponding month. So at first glance, it looks kind of like a pretty big gap in the system, an average of 383 unhoused and unsheltered people per month. But keep in mind a few things. One, most of our shelters actually had quite a bit of availability for much of last year. So it's not exactly due to a lack of resources necessarily, or a lack of availability. Many unhoused folks, particularly families, often prefer to stay in their vehicles for various reasons. Many shelters don't have much storage options for, bringing belongings. Storage units are probably not really an option for most folks experiencing homelessness. So, folks are often making decisions not to stay at a shelter for that reason. And also COVID, a lot of folks are avoiding crowded places, congregate shelters, so they can limit their risk of exposure to COVID. So for this one, I would say, kind of despite how it looks at first glance, the picture is maybe a little more complicated. Sheltering is one area where I think our community has been making a lot of strong efforts. Perhaps there's more that can be done in terms of making shelters less congregate, maybe separating beds, those kinds of things. Hotels have been purchased along those lines, or potentially storage options for folks. So that's the kind of story about providing shelter here. But shelter is not housing. HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, rightly considers when you're in shelter, you are still homeless. So another question we might also want to ask about all of these homeless episodes is, are they moving through that system to be housed? So how many of these newly unhoused folks are having coordinated entry conversations, and getting screened for housing solutions. So thinking back to that flow chart we looked at initially with all of the the different boxes and arrows. So the question I'm asking is, how many folks who became homeless are actually being entered into that path to receive housing services? In this pie chart, we're looking at how many of these known homeless episodes were associated with a screening for housing opportunities, what we call like having a coordinated entry conversation. So you have to have that conversation in order to be assessed for any kind of housing solution that that's provided by a service agency. And so, we're seeing roughly half, a little over half of the 7,000 households or so who had an episode of homelessness also got screened for a housing opportunity. So, what's happening with that light blue section, the folks who didn't get screened? I don't know. Some folks prefer not to engage with the system. Some folks might find their own solution. Some folks may move, get housed elsewhere. Some folks, of course, may become chronically homeless, and it's just not necessarily something we can know from the data at this point. But we can look more at what happens with this group that does get screened for housing opportunities, which is definitely an important one. So are the housing opportunities keeping up with the need? So just to kind of briefly repeat what I mentioned when we were looking at the flow chart earlier, when an unhoused person has a coordinated entry conversation, usually one of two things happens. Either we determine that they can be diverted from homelessness quickly, or that they're not divertible and that they need a more serious housing intervention. So for those that are not divertible, they're put on a housing wait list. And we have a lot of people who come out of the conversations needing that. So on this double line graph, the top line, that red line, is tracking the number of households that were added to that wait list each month last year, roughly 250 each month. The bottom green line is tracking the number of actual housing opportunities that were available each month. So, we came up quite short, around 180 each month, 180 deficit of referrals for housing on average. So basically the inflow into homelessness has been much higher than the outflow to housing. I'd point out there are communities that have reached what's called functional zero homelessness, where these lines would basically be the same. They'd be even with each other. Anyone becoming homeless can very quickly be housed. There aren't a lot of those cities, but they are out there. So this tells me we need to ideally attack both of these lines. We need to drive that red line down however possible, and we need to pull that green line up in whatever ways we can. How do we do that? The ways to reduce inflow into homelessness, we know affordable housing is a huge issue, especially in our area. Better homeless prevention, mental health, addiction services. So that's bringing down the red line. In terms of pulling the green line up, or that housing opportunities up, that's increasing housing services, more rapid rehousing services, more permanent supportive housing services. The problem is, of course, there's serious barriers in the way of all of these things in terms of inflow. Construction companies don't have much incentive to build affordable housing. The public doesn't have much appetite for having affordable housing built, at least not in their neighborhood. Outflow problems into housing is just as difficult. One issue I hear about a lot is that HUD will only fund rentals in units that meet their definition of fair market rent. But particularly in our area, housing costs are rising so fast, rising much faster than HUD's estimate of what's fair, of their fair market rent estimates. So that's a huge barrier. And then in terms of the folks who need permanent supportive housing, those units are just really, really expensive. It's probably the most difficult barrier in this equation, just because of the amount of mobilization of funding and operational support that's required to set up new units and maintain them. So, I would say this deficit is probably one of the most significant problems we have with homelessness here. This is why it's so visible in our community. And I mean, just to kind of drive it home a little more, just to touch back on this flow chart. Essentially what I'm saying is that there are way more people flowing into this yellow wait list for housing box than there are people moving out of it into housing. So a big bottleneck in service. That's why we see so much homelessness here. Next, I'll change gears a little bit, look at something a little different, but equally important issue, racial equity and homelessness. So how does homelessness in our community fit with our goals of racial equity? Well, one thing we could look at is how race might impact or correlate with someone's chances of becoming homeless. So one way of doing that is sort of comparing the shape of the homeless population to the shape of the underlying general population. So that's what I'm trying to do in this bar graph here. So the little black marker lines on this graph represent the proportion of the underlying general Pierce County population comprised by each of the listed races or ethnicities. So for example, white folks represent, with this little black marker line, around 75% of the population of Pierce County. Black or African-American folks represent about just under 7 or so percent, multiracial, another 7%, Hispanic Latino, around 10%, and so on. And the gray bars represent the proportion of the homeless population comprised by each of those races or ethnic groups. So what we would want to see here is a situation where the risk or the odds of becoming homeless are the same for each group. In other words, we'd want to see like the little black marker lines resting right at the top of each gray bar. Instead, what we see is that they diverge quite a bit. So we see that white and Asian people in Pierce County are much less likely to become homeless, whereas other people of color, particularly Black and African American people, much more likely to become homeless. So for example, white folks make up 75% of the Pierce County population. That's the black marker line in the white column, but only 40% of the homeless population. That's the gray bar. Whereas Black or African American people make up less than 10% of the population, but a whopping around 23% of the homeless population. So a pretty drastic imbalance there. Reasons for that generally get into theories of network deprivation. That refers to the way that groups have been historically discriminated against, slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, other types of housing discrimination, and are for those historical reasons much less likely to have a network that is, well, the network is there. It's often very well intact, but the network is less likely to have the resources to support them in the event that they lose a job or have a family crisis or something. So yeah, and this idea of network deprivation, I think, is supported by other data we have. I won't present here to keep the presentation on time, but essentially one other way this is supported is that when you look at it, at folks who are entering homelessness, white people are much more likely to enter our system as chronically homeless, which means they have significant barriers to being housed, like addiction, disabilities, multiple episodes of homelessness over many years. which I think kind of tells us that white folks are more likely to be diverted, at least like the kind of easier to solve cases of homelessness in the white community are more likely to be diverted by their own networks. So in summary, it's easier, I think, for people of color to become homeless. It's the case that they can often be diverted more easily, but there's still an enormous inequity in terms of how homelessness affects different race and ethnic groups. Whereas it's maybe harder for white folks to become homeless, but when they do, they're often more difficult to get housed. Okay, this is the final data page that we're going to look at. I just wanted to try to put some of what we've seen into longer term context. So, are there any trends we're seeing over time? Both graphs on this page are looking at homelessness in Pierce County over the past 6 years, years going from left to right. So if you remember the very first data we looked at, that 10,000 or so new episodes of homelessness last year, this line graph at the top is kind of putting that into context. So what you see is we're actually on a bit of a downward trend over the past couple of years. In 2019, for example, we had even more episodes, I think around 13,000 or so. So a bit of a downward trend, but a couple of things to note. I mean, the past 2 years have been all about COVID. So, it could be that the eviction moratorium has prevented some episodes from happening. Hopefully that is the case. But also keep in mind that these are only the episodes that we know about because they interacted with our system in some way. And I mean, I personally think COVID actually probably prevented us from knowing about a lot of homeless episodes. Some folks having been avoiding shelters, which are one of the main entry points to the system. I think in-person meetings were curtailed a bit, replaced by phone meetings in a lot of cases. And I think a lot of agencies are still pretty phone heavy in terms of conversations compared to where they were pre-COVID. Whatever the case may be, 10,000 episodes is still a heck of a lot of homeless episodes. And then the last thing we'll look at here is this bottom graph on this page. So looking at this concept of intervention type needed, again, this is referring back to what happens in that coordinated entry conversation. Is someone divertible? That's what you see along the bottom of this bar graph in green. Again, those are the easier, relatively easier solutions to housing. And then in purple, you're seeing the folks who are not divertible. It's a more costly solution, usually paying for a temporary rental unit. And then the red group, which is kind of what I want to focus on the top, is those who are not divertible and who are also chronically homeless. So they usually require the most costly kind of housing solution, permanent supportive housing. And that one, you can see the trend of it growing year over year. In 2016, less than 10% of folks who had a coordinated entry conversation were chronically homeless. Last year, that was over 23%. So it's more than doubled within 5 years. It doesn't look so drastic on the graph, but as we know from the 10,000 episodes, that 23% can translate into a lot of people. So so I find that increase in chronic homelessness to be quite troubling. I think a sign that we need to do more. To wrap up, I've included just a couple of takeaways here. Our community does really amazing work every single day. Sheltering, it's really incredible the work that our shelters are doing. Diversion, I think, works pretty well to the extent that clients are divertible. I think our system functions very well as a unit. The agencies do a great job collaborating, which I think has probably made the problem less bad than it would have been otherwise. But of course, there's still more to work on. An enormous deficit in the amount of rentals and permanent housing we can offer to folks who need it. And then that kind of real problem of how the risk of becoming homeless is distributed across race and ethnic groups. So with that, I will conclude and thank you all so much for your time.
Wow, what a lot of information, Hank. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot to really process. Are there any questions from anyone for Hank? We got just a couple minutes.
Hank, can you just,
Oh, it looks
Oh.
like Pastor's hands up too.
oh, sorry.
I'll
I
yield,
thought,
I'll yield to Mike. No, it's no worries.
wait, you go right after me. I just thought if nothing else, it might be because you appropriately really, sang the praises of the work of diversion that is being done in Pierce County. And it's a best practice, way to address homelessness that actually, got a lot of its origination here in Pierce County and now it's done nationwide. But can you just give like a 30-second better idea for people, because it's such a great thing and it's so successful here? Like, what's an idea? What's a little bit more idea of what diversion actually means?
Yeah, I think diversion is often, I'm sure there are other people on this call, honestly, who could speak to this better than I could, folks who are involved in actual program management. But, I'll give you my best stab at it. It's for folks who may not have as many kind of like underlying or chronic barriers to homelessness. They find themselves homeless due to a breakup, a crisis in the family, loss of a job, fleeing domestic violence, something like that. But there's not a lot of fundamental reasons for them to that would prevent them from becoming housed. They just need a little bit of help with a rental application fee, a bus ticket, maybe getting in contact with someone in their family network who can help. It's like represents a relatively low cost effort on the part of the agency to kind of quickly get someone back into a housed situation.
Nice. Thank you, Hank. Pastor?
Yeah, I just thought about, Hank, good information. I just thought about, as you mentioned, not necessarily part of your slide deck, but you mentioned how there are cities that have reached functional zero. And I was just wondering, as you aggregate the data, is that likely that those were areas that were less populated by persons of color? And is there a way to pull that data into that? So, I mean, I don't know if it is, but it's very likely that those cities with, who have reached functional zero, probably less populated. So consequently, you don't see the disparity that you see with Pierce County.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It could be. I haven't personally, pulled like demographic data from any of those cities. I mean, I've looked at kind of maps of places that have received it. They tend to be smaller, less smaller cities, less on the coasts, more towards the middle of the country. So yeah, it could be they don't have and more affordable housing. I mean, that's a huge part of the driver here too, I think. So, but I don't want to say that it couldn't be done in Pierce County. Like, we have to think we can solve this problem somehow.
Yeah, I just think it's important that we always keep in mind the challenge of racism and the impact of racial equity on housing, because we see somebody's done it and we're like, well, we could do that exactly, that take that same model off the shelf and apply it. and not realize that model may not work because of racial disparity. So just important. I mean, it doesn't mean that it defeats the work or diminishes the work even, but just that it's even harder work because that has to play a role as well.
Yeah.
That's so excellent that you brought that up, Eric. Thank you. And I think we should dig into that a little bit more. I'm just looking quickly at the Built for Zero website, which is the national movement of best practices and helping communities get to functional zero. And they list 14 communities that have achieved that, and included our Bakersfield, which is in Central California, fairly mixed. There's a lot of Hispanic people there, so people of color from that demographic, but also Rockford, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago, and then Bergen County, New Jersey, which is in the New York City area. So it sounds like there are some communities with a level of diversity that have done this. So that should give us hope.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep us moving on. I know we can continue in conversation because there's a lot of ways to assess what data can tell us as part of the story. Voices are important too, but the systems, we have to remind ourselves, were made through a white lens as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we have to improve, definitely. So next we're going to move to Greg, who is the Rapid Rehousing Program Manager at Associated Ministries, and he is here to share a very new and exciting program. Greg, our opportunity.
Get myself off mute there. Thank you very much, Valerie. Want to make sure we got on the right screen here. So I am the program manager with Rapid Rehousing, and I got to say first, we are honored to be able to actually speak to the community. Speaking for a group that I support that worked very hard to, as a small solution of ending homelessness, they sort of do it unsung sometimes. So it's nice you guys can hear what they do, and then you can have an opportunity to maybe join in that effort of ending homelessness and support the families that are going through that. I'm part of the Family Permanent Housing Department, and just to give you an idea what we do first, and then I'll talk about our new opportunity, is we do what's called rapid rehousing services, where we are taking people literally out of homelessness and stabilizing them in housing. I have a team of 7 case managers, 5 of them that are working with families and individuals that are coming out of homelessness. I have a case manager that works specifically with people that are being housed after coming out of mental institutions or mental facilities. And I even have someone that's working with youth and young adults and housing them, 18 to 24-year-olds. So what we do on a daily basis is we're housing families that have experienced homelessness. So when you saw his little graph and you saw the priority pool, you saw the little greenhouse in the middle, that's us. We're the rapid rehousing people. And once they come up on the list and our services are available, we do an intake with them, bring the family in with the whole goal of housing them first. So the very first thing we do is we assist the families with housing search. We help them with the application process, and we also help them with the funds to do that. So we're providing move-in costs. We're providing rental assistance. We work on what we call a progressive model, where we are slowly stepping people into their rent based on their need, based on where they're at. So not everybody's the same. Everybody we service exactly where they're at. Our goal is that within a year, they're stepping into their rent on their own, and we separate from them. To be able to do that, though, we have to connect the families to critical community supports. Our goal is to create a support network for them so that if they become a point where they are facing homelessness again, that we've equipped them with the community supports to divert that incidence of homelessness again. A lot of times where people end up in homelessness, and Hank just sort of alluded to this, is that when people have a bigger support network, they don't end up homeless. They get out of it. When people don't have a large support network, one crisis, break down car, lose your job, COVID, and I get laid off, all of a sudden things spin out of control. We work with families to create stability and progress them in their goals. So once we get someone into housing and we're starting to get them stabilized, then we start addressing the goals they want to address. Is it going back to school? Is it getting better employment? Is it addressing behavioral health issues? Maybe it's maybe there's chemical dependency problems, which I actually see very rare with families. It's actually mostly just not having enough money from their jobs. But that's what our people do on a daily basis. Now, the problem with this is we have lots of money that's given to us through grants to help stabilize families, but we only can spend it on specific things. We can spend it on rent. We can spend it on moving things. Sometimes I can do furniture, but not very often. So I'm very limited at what I can do. So there's a lot more support that's needed. But the most important resource is community. So beyond rent and money, it's community. We need to plug people into a community and know that there's other people that will support them when things get tough. Gathering resources that have been lost along the way when they're trying to obtain housing. So yes, we get them back into housing, but they've lost all their possessions. Maybe their storage shed was seized during the process, and they lost all their clothes, and they lost all their kitchen utensils, and they lost everything that they had. And so now we're moving them into an empty apartment, and we're doing everything we can just to find beds and furniture. But beyond that, they're moving into a new place that they need to feel connected. They need to feel accepted. They got to feel like they're supposed to be there, because they've been sometimes moved across town. Sometimes they've moved distances. Sometimes it's out of state and they've ended up here. They came here expecting a job that didn't happen and they got stranded here. But so for them to be successful in housing, they have to be connected and accepted by the community they land in. They need to acquire your own support network to handle a family crisis. So every one of our families comes with their own support network. They have friends, they have families, they have coworkers, they have faith-based groups. They may have their church that's been their church. But then past that, that may not be enough resources. So we try to provide them other community connections that are stronger and can help them stay stabilized longer. They need to establish relationships beyond your own family supports. And that is the key. We know we're only with them a short time. We are not a voucher program. We are stabilizing families in their own rent. Their name is on that lease. And we're going to separate as soon as we can get them stable-ish. Okay, we're not going to establish perfect stability because we know one big crisis could spin them out of control. So what we need to do is give them supports to support that. And after establishing safety and security needs, everybody needs a community. That's what makes them whole. That's what makes the family healthy. So as we've been going through this work and the struggles that we have with how we can spend our money and the needs of our families, we thought, what is the best way is to probably ask the community, can you help us? And I want you to go back a little bit. And I think everybody here can have empathy of being in this sort of circumstance, even if you were never homeless. You were the first, new day at a new school. You didn't know any of the kids. They didn't know you. You didn't have any friends. You didn't know where the lunchroom was. You moved into a new neighborhood or a city. Your family moved you for a better job. Your family for a better job opportunity. You don't know where anything's in town. You don't have any friends to rely on. You have no one to call when your car breaks down. You're establishing a home for the first time. If anybody's ever had your very first apartment, you did not know you didn't have a can opener until you didn't have a can opener. And then we went, oh my gosh, I don't have a can opener. I moved in an apartment. I don't have a wastebasket. And all of a sudden, there's things that you need that you didn't realize you needed the day before. Now, does this remind you of something where, when you were ever in this situation, someone probably reached out to you, maybe you found some resources, maybe a community organization. Now, I'm going to date myself on this one, because everybody, I don't know if you remember the welcome wagon people. I know when we moved 200 miles away to a new city, within a week, some lady came to our door that we'd never met, and she had a basket full of stuff. It might have been bottle openers and can openers and stuff, but it was also little footballs, and it was coupons to the local stores and to the pizza place. But we didn't know where the pizza place was, so we had a coupon. I guess back in the day they did this to sell stuff, but I had never seen as a kid something so welcoming as this lady just saying, "Here's some stuff. Welcome to the community. You're now part of our family." So what we want to do is create the same kind of atmosphere. So we're trying to think, what can be our welcome wagon? And we came up with the community care package. The community care package is something we want to be able to provide families when they move in and say, okay, welcome to your home. Welcome to the community. What can we get you? providing them necessities for establishing a new home. You know, do they need some wooden spoons? Provide an opportunity for individuals and organizations to support their neighbors. A lot of times there's organizations that don't. You look at the homeless population, you see numbers like 10,000 incidents of homelessness, and you go, how can I do anything? Well, you can help this one starfish. You can say, hey, let us help this family. Let us give you some support. Having new neighbors of our community feel connected and welcome. They know someone reached out to them. We do want you here. Now, an expanding community beyond who lives next to you. Your neighbor isn't just your neighbor. Your neighbor is who lives in the community and encompasses everyone that experiences this diverse area. So my neighbor isn't just the person next door, it's the person across town. It's the person downtown. It's the person in Sumner. It's the person in Spanaway. They're part of my family as well, and they're part of our community. Now, when we talk about the resources needed, it's an endless list, and we have a very comprehensive list here. I just put together a couple of things that you may see on here and go, you know what? We could do that. We could do that. We could provide someone some paper towels. We could get someone a shower curtain. I can't tell you, no apartments come with shower curtains. You didn't have soap. I lost my measuring cups last year, and it took me forever to find new measuring cups. You know, there's little things that you just have that you sort of count on. And as a brand new family trying to feed their family, they may not have that. Cleaning supplies, a mop, a broom just to clean the apartment. All these things cost money, and they're just trying to get stabilized. But if we could put together a care package for them, that would probably be the best way. Now, I've seen this done many different ways, and this isn't a completely new idea. I did this for permanent supportive housing for veterans a few years ago, and we moved in 44 homeless veterans into a building, and we had every single room in that apartment building sponsored before they came in. So sometimes it could have been the Lions Club, it could be your Elks Club, it could be the Chamber of Commerce, it could be a church saying, you know, they believe in feed my sheep, and they're going to say, hey, we're going to adopt a family, or we're going to gather up all the cleaning supplies and have a cleaning supply drive day, and you guys are going to deliver that. It may go as far as you want to say, hey, we want to just sponsor one whole family and give them a care package every month. I've even seen groups like, you know, Daughters of the American Revolution, but they like to color coordinate everything and make everything match, and lots of stars and stripes, I noticed. How do you do this? Become a community supporter. We have one of our case managers, Crystal Brackey, and she's actually on the call today. She's down there. See, she waves down there. Crystal is going to be handling the coordination of this and will be able to answer your questions. We may have sparked something in you tonight, and maybe you're going, you know what? This would be perfect for our church to do. And maybe you need someone to come in and do a temple talk, or just say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, and we'd be happy to come and explain it to you. Maybe you need us to speak to the council first. I've not met a Rotary Club or an Elks Club that isn't looking for a speaker at lunch all the time. You might need a speaker, and hey, have us come in and we can offer it to your group. Maybe it's something as an organization you guys can get behind. But it gives us a couple things to do. One, we can create the community care packages to give to the families that we're moving in and young adults that we're moving in that really need that start. But it also gives you a chance to be an ambassador for Associated Ministries and the work that we do. And people will see that there's people working hard out there to help these families. And maybe if we just change the narrative of homelessness, that will be enough to be your contribution. So I will also put down, let's see if I can find the, when I get off of here and I stop sharing, I will share the number again so that you can see it in the chat box. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have about this right now.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. This is an awesome, fun opportunity. This is a feel-good opportunity. If you really want to get involved, this is a great way, and you can get your community to give back. What I am going to ask you to do when Greg puts the information in the chat box, just if you have any questions, you can reach out to Crystal, later, and I'm going to send something out as usual post meeting, but just for time's sake, we got to move on to our last and final speaker. We've just had a good time. Time is flying by tonight. So I wish we had more time. So thank you so much, Greg and Crystal, for agreeing to coordinate this exciting new project. Hey, try to be the first to do it. That'd be fun. We could celebrate you. So our next speaker is going to be with Mark Merrill. He is the director of the special initiatives for Associated Ministries, and again, the former executive director for shared housing services. And he is going to talk to you about Associated Ministries' newest program, shared housing services.
All right, great. Thank you, Valerie. And yeah, it's so great. These quarterly meetings, you see faces because of Zoom or when we were in person, but now Zoom, you see names and it's like, oh, haven't seen you forever. And as you know, some exciting news came out at the end of last year of a merger between shared housing services and Associated Ministries. And to really sum it up, the one phrase that came to mind is we are stronger together than we are alone. And that literally kind of was the driving force behind the merger of how can two organizations doing well come together and really make even a bigger impact in the homelessness and in housing instability in the community. And I can't be more excited to have changed jerseys, and we're off to the races. And I was going to put together, I had a ton of figures, and I was putting this PowerPoint. And I thought, you know what? I knew I was going to have less time because I was a third person and everything. I thought, I really just want to have a conversation tonight. And we're going to focus on one area, and that is around young adult homelessness. You know that shared housing services, we've talked about our adult programs before. It's a simple concept of people with an extra bedroom, utilizing it to stay in their homes with getting extra rent or getting some services, maybe if they're seniors that need a little help around the house, and it provides an affordable place to live. Well, take that concept and let's talk about the young people. And especially now, if we're hopefully on the backside of COVID, but I was just kind of thinking back today. I have a niece that moved it back home because of COVID with her mother. Probably everyone here, if you didn't have kids move back home, you know of people that had kids move back home. But think of those kids that didn't have a home to move back to. What happened to them? And so over the last couple of years, we have seen, during the COVID, we have seen more and more. And it's kind of given right now, at any given night, there's probably 600 young people. And when I'm using the term young people, I'm usually thinking of terms of like 15 to 24 that are experiencing homelessness just in Pierce County. That's 600 young people. And so one of the programs that has moved over from shared housing services to Associated Ministries is our Youth Host Home program. And it's, again, the simple concept. We are looking for caring community members that have that extra bedroom, that would be willing to open their home to a young person needing a place to live. And these young people, they come in all different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, and so many of them, you hear their story and they're trying to still go to school, but they, find it tough to study because they're sleeping in a tent. Or, they're working, they're a young person working, but they have no credit history. They have, and they don't have the ability to save up $3,000 to move into their own place. They just need that roof to be able to be stabilized, to work and earn more hours and move ahead in life. And so the Host Home program, what I want all of you to kind of think about, and I'm going to send you out, I was looking at, what Valerie put up earlier, is to start the conversation. And what I want this group to do is to take this and start a conversation back in your churches, back in your Rotary clubs, back just among friends. If you get together on a Friday night for a lovely beverage, to say, you know what? I bet you I know someone that would be willing to open their home to help a young person. And we come in with these young people. Like I said, many of them, I kind of made a note, many of them are in school. You know, if they're not in school, a large percentage are just wanting an opportunity to get back to, you know, finish their high school diploma, or maybe start to, you know, over at TCC or down the road from us at Bates. Many of them have jobs, but like I said, they need a better job, or they need to, you know, be able to, you know, have time in their job to get to a better position. But all of them have the commonality is they just need a safe place to call home. And so we're looking for home providers. And you're going to hear this cry because this is, I think, if we go after and help these young people, then you'll see what Hank had put up about chronic homelessness. You'll see that drop. Because if we can get them while they're young and help them out and help them get ahead, then they won't be revisiting homelessness down the road. And, you know, and for our home providers, we've got you covered. We're going to be picky, so be ready for that. But we will be with you the whole step. We will work with you. We take you through trainings, you know, how to do some mentoring versus parenting. You know, what's it like to have, literally have a stranger young person that's coming maybe from being out, you know, experiencing homelessness, come into your home? How do we take you through how to communicate with young people? You know, that, you know, maybe have some trust issues just because they've been knocked around so hard and everything. And then all the way through, we do case management. You know, the goal is to get them housed, the young people housed, and then our case management come in, and they're pretty amazing. What they do is they help the person pursue goals. They get them back into school. We give them, you know, IDs and the basic needs. We get them, you know, if they're wanting just employment, we get them hooked up with, you know, resume services and all that, and get their jobs. And we help them get that foundation so that in the 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, whatever time it takes for them to build that foundation, then they step out and they get their own place. You know, and they're able to sustain it. That's the whole point. Not only can they get their own you know, apartment or a house, but then they can sustain it going forward and not re-enter homelessness. It's exciting, and it can't be in better hands under Associated Ministries. And so I just kind of wanted to focus in, and like I said, to have a conversation. And I want all of you to take that away. I'll put in the chat.
Did we lose them?
Yeah, I think Mark accidentally disconnected himself,
Yeah, well.
but his information is in the chat already.
Yeah, I'm going to challenge everyone, because remember the charts that Hank presented and that gap between affordable housing? Shared housing is a very logical solution to help with that. Hank shaking his head, yes. So I'm going to challenge everyone, if this somehow touched your heart a little bit, like, ooh, a little spark of interest there, I'm challenging you to find out more information, because it's an amazing program, and I'm challenging you to talk to other people about it. I'm thinking we need to have this conversation, and maybe even have a host home speak to help you really better understand each community quarterly meeting, because we as a community, we have to do something to close that gap. And this is one tangible thing. Most of us can't go out and build a new apartment building or build a new complex, or, you know, but this is something. If we had, there's 300 churches in Pierce County, a little more. If we just had 50% of those have a host, I'm just saying 50%, most people want to say 100%, just to have one host home within that congregation. We just imagine how much that can close, right, Hank? So let's spread the word. We're going to keep talking about this. This is so sorry we only have an hour together. I wish we had more time, but I'm going to send out an article post meeting. Mark's information is in there. Contact me, contact Mark. Hank, if you need further information, I'm going to send out his PowerPoint. And Greg, so excited. I wish we had more time, Greg. I was getting chats. We're going to do something at Associated Ministries. We got to hurry up and start putting these baskets together, everyone. This is so exciting. I hope something touched you in your heart. Just continue. Don't let it fizzle out. Just keep thinking, what can I do next? It could be small, get a couple towels. It could be talking to a friend who has an extra room about the possibility of hosting a youth. Just something, start a conversation, get a couple items, something that is how we're going to impact homelessness. Amen.
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 So, Mark, sorry we lost you. Thank you
No,
so
no, I went blank. That's okay.
Yeah, thank you so much to our Hank, to Greg, to Mark. Thank you so much for giving us this wonderful information that we could take. And we're not going to just stop it, let it stop here. We're going to continue and make sure that we continue to try to impact homelessness, because as Hank clearly showed, it is a huge crisis in our community. So thank you everyone for your time, your ears, your attention, your heart. And we so appreciate you, and bless everyone. Blessings to you all.